Cassie, we are back, and you are getting dangerously close to breaking the record of guests who have been on the podcast more often than any other guest. And you've done it really, really quick. Thanks for joining me again and being open to this. I sent a note to Cassie last night for a special episode that I wanted to put together, tied to a theme of reintroducing myself. We go through and reintroduce who I am, share a little bit about origin story, reintroduce the business, share the journey that we've gone through. And one of the biggest challenges when you try to do something like this solo is it's kind of like looking in a mirror when you're working on self-awareness and you're looking at this reflection of self. You sometimes forget to ask questions that were obvious to someone else. And I didn't want to fall into that trap of just going in and starting to share and pontificate and do all of those things. We've done enough of those solo episodes to know that this is actually one of those that I hope's a bit deeper of a conversation. So Cassie, thank you for being a friend that was interested in coming back onto the show and doing this. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It worked out well that I was available this morning, and I'm always grateful to join you on the show, and I'm eager to break that record. So you'll have to keep me posted on how close I'm getting, because I will plan to break that one here very soon.
You're getting close. The person who's ahead of you right now that doesn't have a name, Mike or Jody. So Connor was on a couple of times, and Jody obviously was on, as the host, and then has been on as guest, is Dan Ponifract. And he's got an episode that's going to go live here pretty soon talking about his new book. And he has been on 3 times. And you will now have been on 3 times when this thing goes live. So you're you're neck and neck.
All right, Dan, coming for you. Well, Mike, we're excited to be a part of this show today. And as you said, we're going to go through kind of some different elements of your story, who you are, how you serve, that kind of thing. But first, I want to ask you, before we get into that, what has been one of your biggest takeaways just from running your business? How long have you been in business for now?
So launched Catalyst with Mike, the other Mike that I mentioned, back in 2015. And we did it as kind of a side thing when side things weren't really a side things. We're building the business in the background, and did that in 2015, brought our first customer on in October of 2015. And then when we brought a second customer on, it was too close to the type of business that we were in. So in January 2016, we both gave notice and left the W-2 space to go all in on, at that point, Catalyst sale. So it's been officially since January of 2016. But in the background, it started in around October of 2015.
Fantastic. Well, so what has been one of the biggest takeaways so far in that, a 7-year journey or so? What have you learned along the way?
You never know. Like you're never going to know the answer. There's no right way or wrong way or the way or best way to do any of this stuff that we're working on. If you were to look at the business over the course, when you back up and look at the business over the course of this 7.5 getting close to almost 8-year period, you look at it and say, wow, there are a lot of S curves. Do you really know what you're doing? And the reality is no, I don't know what we're doing. But we know what drives getting that work done. And we have an idea, a thesis on how we should operate the business, what problems we're going to solve in the marketplace, why those are important to solve for. And then you go through the process of attempting to solve those. And then over time, you realize some people don't care about those problems, or that's not the right problem to solve for, or there's too much risk on either side of the equation to try to solve for the problem there. And my view on this is you won't know the answer to those questions until you actually go in and start the business and start doing the work. So that has been the biggest lesson that I've learned, because going in, I was certain we were building a business that was going to take off, and it has in some areas, and then it hasn't in other areas. So lots of lessons learned, but that was the biggest one. Is you just don't know. So you have to go out there and do work and be really aware of the feedback that you're getting, not only from the market relative to money that's being paid, but feedback that you're getting from people inside the market, and then feedback that you get from yourself around, does this really give me energy? Is this the kind of work that I want to do? Is this the kind of work that I'm meant to do? So that that's been a huge lesson.
Absolutely. It's so true. And just reiterating the importance of adaptability, right? So being able to go in and you can plan all you want and create a structure for achieving your goals, for launching the business, finding
Yep.
success, but things always come up, they happen. And until I think you receive feedback from customers, you test concepts, you really
Yep.
don't know. And so the ability to be able to say, I'm going to stay humble towards these ideas. I'm going to adapt if needed and just keep pushing forward. But learning from those, I think, is huge and ultimately creates success, I think, down the road.
I think it's the only way to do it, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah, nobody hits their number or is successful in business buying from themselves. And so if we don't take the time to engage with others, get that feedback, to work through it, ask really tough questions, questions that are tough for us to say out loud because they indicate a level of vulnerability, a level of lack of understanding, a level of curiosity. We aren't comfortable asking those questions to the market, then we're not going to learn.
Couldn't agree more. Well, let's go back, Mike, if you don't mind. Some may know you well and what you do, but some may not. And you have recently gone through sort of an iteration of your business, even in the last year or so. So take us back, if you don't mind. Tell us who Mike Simmons is, what's your story, and what kind of led you to where you are today in your business.
I'm a husband and a father, and we've got a family. We live out here in Arizona. You should go all the way back though, and you start to say, okay, like how did I kind of become, or what were the kind of the building blocks to get here? I was born in New York, out on Long Island, and I'm a lifelong Jets fan, lifelong Islander fan. I've stuck to my roots from a sports perspective. We moved to Southern California my during spring break my freshman year in high school, which was a completely different environment. Like when we left, yeah, we lived in New Jersey for a couple of years before moving to Southern California. But when we left New Jersey, the feedback I got from friends or the conversations were like, "Well, you better have as many hamburgers as you can now because they don't eat meat out there. They don't eat hamburgers out there." And my favorite restaurant, the best hamburger in the world, comes from In-N-Out Burger, which is, you know, there in Southern California. So there's these biases that we have around what things are in areas that we haven't experienced. And when we moved to Southern California, definitely stuck out. We're there. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt in kind of like June gloom weather, where most of the locals are wearing sweatshirts. So you just didn't you look a little bit different and you sound different, like really strong Long Island accent, hard G's, all of that kind of stuff that's kind of gone away. So there's that period of what you see is, okay, now we're shifting things completely. We're going through change. That change is going to be hard and it's going to be different. And it was an awesome move because I gained a better appreciation for the beach. I love the West Coast. I live in Arizona now. If we could, we'd live in Southern California, kind of go back and forth on that. But the cost of living out there is a bit high. But there's this kind of rough, direct, intense East Coast side and a laid back, a little bit more chill West Coast side. And both of those will come out in different times and places. And I think that brings a unique intensity to the type of work that I do. I can be super intense in a crisis situation. On the disc, when you look at disc profiles, I am a hard D. I can tone that up or down a bit, and I think that comes from the experience of going from East Coast to West Coast. And then I went to Arizona State. That's where Jen and I met. I think as you take all of these different brushstrokes of the painting, you start to see, okay, there's an intensity, there's a level of interest, there's a level of focus. And over time, you realize when you're in these areas of isolation, when you're moving around a lot and you're trying to find friends, but you're not an extrovert, you kind of like to stay to yourself and you're a little bit awkward, you can start to feel alone. over time, this is kind of where the foundation of how do I help people do the things they want to do better and faster. I think this is where that comes from, because I've been in those spaces where I wanted to belong, I wanted to be a part of things, and I didn't know how to fit in, and was just looking for help. And now I want to be that thing that kind of helps people go along. So Arizona State, degrees in psychology, primarily to get through a lot of the mental stuff that was going on inside my family and inside my own head and all of that kind of stuff. And then I never was going to practice it. I was never going to do postgraduate work. I never wanted to get into sales, primarily because the people that I knew around me who were in sales were the not the greatest. I don't have a real strong relationship with my dad. So there's this, would attribute sales and these kind of roles with people who looked different and sounded different when they were out there in front of people at an event, but were completely different inside the house. And there was that disconnect I just attributed with sales as a profession. So I never went down the sales route, or didn't think I would ever go down the sales route until I saw what really good looks like. So my first job was at UPS, real job. I did some telemarketing type stuff that at ASU. I got fired from that job because I wouldn't go off the script, or wouldn't read the script. Like, there was a script that you had to go through, and that wasn't me. So I'm not a script person. I went to UPS, worked at UPS for 7 years, operations management, left as a full-time operations management specialist, and then got into a company called Smartforce back in 2000, which was an ed tech or e-learning company. And they were talking about e-learning before e-learning was a thing, bridging the gap between learning and training and technology. I thought technology was really cool. And I think this learning thing is really cool, helping people be a better version of themselves, do the things they want to do better and faster. So that just kind of mixed together. And that was where I first kind of got into smaller organizations. I went from a 300,000 person organization at UPS to a company that had just over 1,200 people in it.
Well, it's really cool, I have to say, to see some of the pieces of your story and how what you're doing today is reflected in those. I always love to hear kind of the catalyst per se, or the crucible that led someone to create what they've built. Because I think, as we know in Story Brand, that whole framework, having this empathetic tie-in that you understand, you've been through something similar that you're now solving for, I think is very powerful. So you kind of laying your story out kind of ties into that. And as we'll see in a minute, when I ask you kind of about what you're doing today,
Yeah.
I think people will be able to point back to your story and know that you've been there, you get it, and you kind of experienced something similar. All right, Mike. So that was around 2000, early 2000s. What happened between then and now?
Yeah. So 9/11 happened, which was pretty crazy. You go and you're in this office environment when 9/11 is going on, and then everybody kind of goes home. We had our first kid a year later on 9/11, 2002. And while all of that's happening, Jen's like, look, just as long as he's not born on 9/11, just as long as he's not born on 9/11. And then Sean, we're watching a highlight reel or recap of 9/11 stuff while in the at the hospital. And so a couple of things happened. I was fortunate enough to move into other roles inside Smartforce and SkillSoft. I moved into more senior level customer success type roles, although we didn't call it that back then, working with key accounts on the West Coast. We relocated to Washington State, lived up there for a couple of years. That was when Jen was able to stay home with Sean. And it was really what was cool about that is, in the daycare, he had ear infections. We had to and we were right at a point where we're going to have to put tubes in his ears. And by him not having to stay in like that daycare area while Jen was working, we were able to avoid that. So a lot of really cool things happened, but we realized that Seattle wasn't for us. And about a year into our vacation in Seattle, we decided it was time to come back down to Arizona. So moved back down to Arizona. Then I moved in my first account executive role, full sales role, carrying a quota, had some challenges there, built the business up well, but ran into a situation where I was put on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, left that company and joined O'Reilly Media as part of Safari Books Online. And there I had a chance to really expand a lot of the work that I was doing from a sales perspective, and then get into a point where I had a chance to lead teams again, lead people again. And for there, we're in now it's this combination of account executive, account management, strategic account management, where you're both finding new opportunities inside large existing accounts, and then getting into a point where we start to specialize inside the organization and create ways that we can really optimize for revenue inside the organization. This is where I got the greater appreciation for how important it is to find the right role for the right people at the right time inside organizations, so that they're working with the right organizations at the right time. And there are reasons why you want people to move in and out of each of those roles, because there's a skill set that they'll get from each of those roles that they can apply in the work that they're doing. So that's where I got a greater appreciation for building out the systems and process stuff on the sales side when thinking about the entire Dare to Grow model. So demand, acquisition, retention, and expansion. And I think it was through that experience of both having the operations background, the direct sales experience, the customer success work, the leadership that has kind of put this body of work together, where I'm able to break out of some of the silos that we build inside organizations and start to see things from the perspective of internal and external customers. The piece that I left out when we were talking about kind of the way back when I was a little kid, I would love playing with things like an erector set or Lincoln Logs or Legos. And I like taking things apart and putting them back together. I was never really good on reading instructions, but I wanted it to look like the picture. So you'd look like the picture somewhat, and you have a couple of extra parts, but there was this whole piece around being creative in the way that we deconstruct things and then put things back together. So that's me kind of in a nutshell.
So tell me then about launching Catalyst Sale. Kind of what was that experience there? I know you mentioned already you left the corporate space at some point and you created this business. So what did that business look like kind of towards the beginning? And then of course we'll get into what it looks like today and that iteration. But I'll tell you this though, it's cool to see again, looking back at your story and hearing all of this, how you tend to gravitate towards the individual, towards people.
Yep.
And so although you were finding success helping organizations or working at that level, this shift towards the individual, which kind of ties into what you're doing today. But just had to say that's very cool that you kind of naturally gravitate towards helping individuals problem solve or whatever they're going through as well.
You think about it, and thanks for bringing it up. Everything happens at an individual level. Like we're all individuals operating in a broader ecosystem. And as we engage in that ecosystem, we can either amplify each other and come together as a team and accomplish much more than we ever could have accomplished as individuals, or we can isolate ourselves and get caught up in our own stuff. And I think too often you see folks like me work inside organizations and they start at the leadership level. They start at the top and they start with these these teams. And this is where everything's going to be focused. And then we hope it's going to trickle down. And what we're doing is we're asking people who do not have an expertise in development, in organization behavior, in organization systems, in leadership, to convey ideas and thoughts that we start at the top down throughout the organization. And it does not work. So what happens if we flip that script and we go through and we say, you know what, really it all starts at the end point. It all starts, and that starts to get a little technical, but it starts at the individual who's out there doing the work. And if they get better at leading self, working through frameworks, get better at problem solving and decision making, they can start to have a much more positive impact on the broader system. And then really cool things happen inside the organization. And I see this happen over and over again when you take an individual focus. So thanks for highlighting that. It has taken a long time to realize it. It's because my first view of leadership was one person who was a member of my team at UPS cried in the operation, and she cried in the operation because I was just an absolute jerk. I was so focused on what needed to happen from an operation perspective. We needed to get packages into things so that those things could get onto an airplane so an airplane could leave on time. And it was all about moving that thing from time in time and space. Completely lost the human element of it. Hopefully I've gotten a little bit better on that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been a heck of an evolution. So where the business started, I was the typical entrepreneur. I'd always wanted to start a business, but I didn't have the guts to do it, didn't know what it was going to be, and didn't actually take action. Went from, hey, maybe we'll do a car washing business, to maybe we'll start a restaurant, to maybe I'll go out. It was the typical entrepreneur kind of mode. And then when Mike knew that this was something I wanted to do. He had run a consulting business and training business in the past, and he was ready to make a move. So we worked together and said, okay, the time's right, given everything that's going on inside the organization. Let's go do this. And without those training wheels, without that support, without that experience, I would not have had the guts to go out and do this. Now that I've done it, I never want to go back. I can help organizations better by providing an outside perspective and helping people think differently about the problems that they're working through, challenges that they're working through, than I can do inside the organization, trapped in a lot of the bureaucracy and crap that goes on. Because some organizations are not willing to change. They say they want to change, but then they apply the same thinking to the problems that they're working through, and they don't allow that change to happen. By we're working with me, getting an outside perspective, hearing some questions, these questions like we're talking through that I wouldn't be asking if I was looking in a mirror, hearing those outside perspectives, those questions that give me a nudge to think a little bit differently about things. That's where change can happen. That's where the magic can happen. That's where we can actually move forward. But it has to happen at an individual level. It won't happen at a group level, because in a group, you get groupthink. In a group, you fall back into norms. In a group, you fall back into the culture of the organization and the way that we've done things. And someone is more vocal than the other person. And it drives me absolutely freaking nuts. So yeah, I've shifted things to the end point.
Well, and if you would have asked most people who knew you, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they would say that Mike's the sales guy. Mike helps sales functions develop within an organization. And that's what you were known for. But you're making this shift towards the individual, as you mentioned, even today, as you did many years ago. And you seem to, like I said, gravitate towards time and time again. So what pain points do people face that you're solving for, and what are you offering to them today? And what has that shift been like for you?
Yeah. So I think starting with the definition of what sales is will really help with this, because there's this transfer of perspective that happens, I think, when people go from the mode that I was in, which is sales is this negative thing, to where people are full of crap, where their outside persona doesn't match your inside persona, to what professional sales looks like, which is what I saw at Smartforce and that team, and Impacts, which was Beyond Selling Value, is the first real sales book that I read. I read Spin, which was Rackman's. But so let's just talk with a general definition of sales, or how I define sales. Sales is about connecting the dots between problems and solutions. Some of those problems are known, some of them are unknown. Some solutions are known, some are unknown. Our job as sales professionals is to help people who have problems that are unaware of go through an experience where they become problem aware. Now, some people are just problem aware. Like, I don't know necessarily that I need to have aspirin around the house until the first time I open the door and it smacks me in the head and I have a headache. There's a transition. There's something that happens, a state change. And that's the catalyst piece that kind of arcs through all of this. When we as sales professionals are out there helping people solve problems, we have to help them make that transition between problem unaware to problem aware. Now, if you're problem aware, it's much easier to go through the, hey, now I need to solve for this thing. But if I'm not aware that I keep tripping over the same thing because my shoes are untied, then I need someone to nudge me with a question so that I observe that my shoes are untied. Well, so problem solving at its core is what sales is about: connecting the dots between problems and solutions. Some are known, some are unknown on either side. when you make the shift and you start looking at all of the challenges that we run into as a both, inside our house, inside our neighborhood, inside our community, inside our state, inside our country, one of our biggest challenges is problem solving. Like getting a clear definition around what is the actual problem that we're looking to solve, not what I think the problem is or what my perception is versus like, let's come together and be aligned on what the problem is that we're looking to solve. And I've got a framework that looks like a hexagon that works through a couple of core questions. What problem are we solving? Who has the problem? Who's impacted by the problem? Who cares about those who have it or impacted? Why is it important to solve? Why does it persist? And kind of work through these questions, and you'll see it out there. But that is a problem-solving framework that allows you to work through things with clarity and focus, minimize or shift perspective and minimize risk. What if everybody out there got better at problem solving, had a better perception of self when it comes to problem solving, when it comes through working through these challenges, when it comes through decision making? How do I make a decision? How do I plot things up against a 2x2 to shift my perspective on how I think about these things? How do I work through communicating more effectively with others? How do I empathize with others? What tools can I apply? These are all individual human challenges that we run into daily inside our house, inside our neighborhood, inside our communities, across our state, across our country. It's not just a sales challenge, it's a people challenge. And these tools, once you start getting better at deconstructing things, getting better at problem solving, getting better at goal setting and execution, getting better at decision making, getting better at effective communication, you can literally change the world. And first start by changing your world, and then change the world around others, and then change the world that you operate in. And I don't think we do a good enough job teaching our kids how to do this. And one of the reasons I don't think we do a good enough job teaching our kids how to do this is because I don't think we know how to do this. And one of the reasons we don't know how to do this is because we get so caught up in doing the work day after day after day after day after day, running from one thing to another. So what I'm hoping to do is help everybody take just a bit of a pause, hit a speed bump, ask some questions, and work through a process to get better at problem solving and decision making, goal setting and execution, and effective communication.
Well, and I think with execution, there's a number of challenges I think people face with executing properly. One of the things may be time, as you said. They are so busy doing the work, they don't create space to game plan and to create steps to achieve those goals. I think another thing too, you mentioned problem aware. I think most of the times we believe we know what the problem is. So for example, maybe we feel the problem is I'm not launching my business or I'm not making sales, but a lot of times there's a problem behind the problem. And so shifting your mindset towards being aware towards the sub problem versus the bigger issue, I think is another thing. So I want to ask you about that a little bit. What challenges do people face with execution, no matter if it's within an organization, achieving goals there, or on the individual level, even with, let's say, getting healthy, losing weight, finding a hobby, launching a side hustle? What are some of those challenges outside of time and just allocating the right steps towards achieving those goals?
Yeah, I think the big one, and you hit on it, it's that definition piece. Like, what's the problem behind the problem? How do we put on our, channel our inner journalist, channel our inner Lois Lane, and go deeper into the story? What's the headline? Well, what's the thing behind the headline? And you can start doing some root cause analysis type stuff around this, like a Toyota 5 Whys type thing. The big challenge that people run into first is they've not gone deep on actually defining or deconstructing the problem that they're focused on. Another challenge that people run into is they look at they have these problems that are really, really broad. Like, hey, I want to grow my business, or I want to lose 15, or, I want to lose weight or get healthy or whatever. And they're not really specific around what does that actually mean. Like, what do you mean grow your business? Add another dollar into the business, add more people, add more customers. Like, all of those things can happen without actually having a positive impact on the thing behind what grow your business is. So The challenge that people have is asking themselves those specific questions, and they're really hard to do if you lack self-awareness, if you struggle with going deep, if you struggle with being alone with your thoughts. These things are really, really hard to do. So the big one is kind of deconstructing things into smaller pieces and doing that through a process of asking questions. The other challenge that people tend to do is once we identify a problem, we go right into solution. I got a problem. I'm hungry. Okay, let's go to the grocery store and pick up some food to eat, or let's go to In-N-Out Burger and get something to eat. Well, I'm not hungry for a hamburger. I'm hungry for fish, or I'm not really needing to sit down for a meal. I actually just need a snack. Like we jump into solutioning immediately. So we start getting into doing the work really quick. And what ends up happening, and what I'm seeing over and over again, and I'm really getting frustrated with it. And I think this is a challenge that happens with things like journals in the marketplace. Like I'm asking the question now, is the journal the problem? Because you have all of this space to put all of the list of things that you're going to do, but there's no connection between how that work aligns with the ultimate goal, what the strategy is. So another challenge that's out there is making the connection between the what from a work perspective and the how I'm going to organize time that keeps things focused on getting the right work done in the right order. I think we've got a challenge out there when it comes to thinking about solving problems from a strategic perspective. Building that strategy so that we can assess whether or not our tactics are aligned with the strategy, or we're just doing work just for the sake of doing work.
Well, I think another issue too that I've seen in just my own goal setting is a lack of accountability or having people to support me through that. So it's all good and well to say, I'm going to achieve this, or these are the steps I need to take, the sub steps in order to achieve this goal. But sometimes we fall off. And a lot of times it's because we don't have the support we need, or we don't have just the people around us to encourage us through that, depending on the challenges that come about. And so I think one thing that I've seen you really excel in and something you gravitate towards is you're a connector of people. So someone can come to you, they can say, Mike, I have this challenge. You maybe help them break that down, but then you can also offer to them your network and say, I know someone who can help guide you through this, or I know someone who can help you face this roadblock in your business, whether it's marketing, design, etc., number of things. So why do you feel connection and network has been beneficial to you just in your own goals and helping you kind of get towards your dreams or these problems you're trying to solve in your own life or business?
Yeah, there are specific problems that I know I can't solve for. There's specific contexts that I don't have. You don't want to talk to me about training a dog. You'd rather have a conversation with your husband, Micah, about that. You don't want to talk to me about one-to-many demand gen. That's not my strength. One-to-one interaction is. So if you've got a marketing challenge, there's other people in my network that I can connect you with. If they're like Cassie, if you've got a sales challenge, there's no one better. If you've got a interacting with others challenge, I would also put myself up there high on that list because of the approach to problem solving, the approach to detaching from the problem, asking questions, working through the process and system type stuff. So the reason why network is super important to me is when it goes to that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If we work together, we can go so much further than we would if we go and do things alone. And when you do things alone, you can get yourself caught in the trap of moving really, really fast, but not accelerating speed to impact. And when you get caught in that trap, you start to feel less than. You start to feel worn down. You start to feel like you're not worthy of doing these things. Confidence starts to wane. You don't trust yourself. And then you can get yourself into this mental haze of, do I really belong? Am I doing the right thing? Am I working with the right people? Am I valued? So getting back into the network, when you engage with others and are deeply interested in the things that they're interested in doing, the things that they get energy out of solving for, the kind of work that they love to do. Like, I'm not a financial guy, so you don't want me to be your CPA, but we know people in our network who are CPAs. So we make those connections. Let's get the right people in the right place doing the right things so that we can all go a lot further together. And the only way that we can do it is if we take a deep interest in understanding what people are good at, what people want to get better at, what people enjoy doing. And if you listen to people, this is the cool thing about being an introvert. If you ask questions and you listen to people rather than trying to convey your message, then you learn a lot about what they're interested in, what they like doing, who they can serve. And then when you find other people out there in the community who are struggling with those things, you can actually help them, that person who's struggling with something faster, and help the other person who's building their business faster by connecting those two dots. And that doesn't happen if you get stuck in your own way or the worst thing that can happen, and this happened early on in the business, you get trapped into scope creep and you start thinking, well, I can do that. I hear so-and-so talking about that. I can do that. I do that in conversations. And then now all of a sudden you're getting further and further away from your center of gravity, your thing that gives you that energy, primarily because you want to operate your business and you want to generate revenue, and you get caught up in these ideas of all of the things you could do. So if you've got a strong network, you start to realize that there are professionals who are really good at solving specific problems. And then you start to identify or hear the people inside your network who are struggling with those things. And you can actually help them by connecting the dots between those two people and make things better. So that's why community and networking is so important to me. It helps people solve problems faster.
That's amazing. And so now we've broken down kind of the why and the what, but now I want to ask you the who and the how. So there's a lot of people out there that say, I have a problem with execution in a number of areas of my life, whether it's personal or professional. And so what type of issues are you helping people walk through? Who are your solutions for, and what are you offering to these individuals to help them and guide them through that achievement or building a plan for proper execution?
So the who am I for piece are people who are going through some kind of a transition or change that's either been thrust upon them because of life experiences, kids leaving the house, whatever, being laid off, or they've entered into that space because they want to do something better, they want to do something different, or they want to go out there. So it's people who are going through some kind of change or transition and lack systems and process to help them navigate it. Meaning the question they're likely asking is, hey, I'm working on this thing, but I don't know where to start. I've been working on this thing. I'm doing a lot of work, but I don't feel like I'm making any progress. In a clarity call, we can work through that and find some of that clarity and get to that point where all of this kind of spaghetti in the bowl or stuff up against the wall starts to shift from chaos to clarity. So it's people who are going through some kind of change or transition. We've either we've acquired a new company and we've brought them in. So that's on the organization side and then working with individuals there, or we are going into a new market, or I'd like to transition from my W-2 job to building out my business as a solopreneur, but I don't really know where to start. I've got this thing that I want to do, but I'm struggling with bridging the gap between where I am today and where I want to be next. So let's design for that path. Let's identify some tests, strategy, where we want to focus time, energy, and attention. Let's gain clarity on what those specific things are that we're going to do inside each of those tests so that we're not looking at this mess of all of the things to be done. It just becomes very clear. Okay, here's the next thing I'm going to do. And then the next thing I'm going to do. And then the next thing I'm going to do. And I've got data to hold myself accountable to getting the work done. because I struggle with accountability, either because I'm not comfortable telling people what I'm working on or sharing that, or because I don't have systems and process in place. So I might struggle with that accountability piece that you're talking through. But now I've got data where I can go through and I can assess, is the work actually getting me closer to the goal? Is the work that fulfills me? If the Am I doing the work? If I'm not doing the work, then I got to get back to doing the work. If I'm doing the work and it doesn't fulfill me, maybe it's not the right work to do. And if I'm doing the work and it's not getting me close to the goal, then I've got to fire the work. And again, it's hard for people to make those decisions, especially when they tell friends and family, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to work on. And then they stop doing it and they fire something and they're like, now I'm a failure. Everybody thinks whatever. No, they're all focused on their own thing. So let's get you focused on your thing and get things moving forward.
I think a lot of times we're too close to our own individual challenges that we do not have the right lens to look at that challenge and be able to take a step back. And so from doing some different calls with you and breaking down different challenges, whether in life or business, I see this ability for you to be able to look at these challenges from a farther viewpoint and help people break it down. Because again, it's just a matter of having someone coming alongside you to be able to articulate that issue. And a lot of times the issue, as we said earlier in the episode, looks different than what we may think our own issue is. And so it's been really powerful to see you analytically look at these challenges that we have, again, both personally or professionally, and help us break it down and create smaller chunks. Because I think that's the other thing too with goal setting. We have this overwhelm. We see this big goal in front of us and we think to ourselves, there's no way I'm ever going to achieve that. But it's just a matter of how do we break it down into chunks and achieve one micro goal at a time in order to get to that goal. And so you have some awesome resources around that so far, including the game plan. And so where can people find out about that? What's the best way to take advantage of some of these different offerings that you have? And do you offer individual consulting, as you mentioned currently, or what is that looking like for you?
Well, thanks for sharing the story and the conversations that we've had, and just sharing the impact that it's had on that end. The best place to go is go to findmycatalyst.com. That's where everything is. So the business has been rebranded to Catalyst Acts, advising, coaching, training, and speaking. Go to findmycatalyst.com. And the entry point into working with me, working with the business, is the game plan. And it's about achieving results through strategy. And that's the first focus, because once people start to see the impact that that system can have, then they want to go deeper. And then you get into some of the Catalyst tools that we talked about a little bit earlier around problem solving, decision making, and effective communication. But go to findmycatalyst.com. And there's a number of different ways to work. The three core ways: you can download the notebook. The notebook is $45 currently. You can engage in the course. I think the course is $150 currently. You can engage directly with me from a coaching perspective, and we've extended that to 45 minutes, and that's $450 currently. These are all as of August 31st, 2023. I want all of that stuff to be accessible to people, and you go in at the right point. Like if you're not ready to have conversations, go in and do it yourself with the notebook and guide through things. If you want a little bit more structure, go and take the course and do the 15-day program. If you want to work with me directly, go and do the coaching. And on the coaching will include the course and the notebook, and the course includes the notebook and all of that kind of stuff. The other thing I'm doing that we're announcing this week is doing this for teams. So if you have a team of people where you're going through some business planning for the year and you don't know where to start, or typically you do business planning at the end of December, in that period between December and January 1st, you're like, yep, I'm going to start everything and everything's going to be great because New Year's is coming and 2024 is going to be completely different. I would challenge you, start earlier. So there are programs that I'll do with teams that we're kicking off this week where bring your team together and we'll work on what the scope is. But that could be in the context of a half-day workshop where we do it virtually, full day thing where I come into your organization. We do it inside your organization, a couple of different ways to do that. But we'll do this for teams, and we'll get this level of clarity and focus created for the team and do it early so that we're not running through planning right at the end of the year. So those are the four broad ways to work with me. You can do it as teams, individual, in the coaching, the course, and the notebook. And it's all on findmycatalyst.com. That's where we're pushing everybody.
There you go. Findmycatalyst.com. And I can attest again, Mike has been a catalyst, quote unquote, in my life, my husband's life, friends' lives. It's been an honor to know you and to learn from you. And you have helped us tremendously. So I can say firsthand, I've benefited from these offerings that you've provided. And I'm excited to see what you continue to create, because it comes from, I believe, a very genuine and servant's heart attitude approach for that. And it's been very cool to see what kind of support you've been able to provide to a number of different people, depending on the challenges that they're facing. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Cassie, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate the conversation. We went into areas that I wouldn't have gone in had I just turned the mic on. You're out there still listening to this. Thanks for joining the podcast, listening to the podcast, sharing it with others. I'm going to put Cassie on the spot. I'm going to ask her 2 questions. These are 2 questions I've been asking people lately. And I think you can ask people inside your network these questions if you want to get an understanding of current state. Cassie, when you hear a word, someone says a word, what's the word that you hear where my name is the first name that comes up?
Execution. I probably would have formally said sales, which I do think of you for that still, but for now, execution or goal setting are 2 of the phrases. Yeah.
And then when you hear my name, like someone's having a conversation, my name just pops up. So you hear someone say Mike Simmons. What's the first word that comes to mind?
Execution.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm going through this practice with others, and typically get the same, or not the same, a similar response. I shared some of the words with Cassie earlier, but there are a lot of people who would say sales as that first one. And the reason I'm asking these questions is to get an understanding of what's current state, because that's what I'm known for in the marketplace: sales, systems, RevOps, all of these, go to market, all of that kind of stuff, which is all really cool. And I'm happy to help people with it. But I think there's a bigger challenge that's out there. It's this challenge of leadership from the front line, building culture, building leaders from the front line by helping with this problem solving, decision making, and execution. And that's the word I want to be known for, is that execution, because execution's where it's at. Everything else is just crap. It feels good to do some work and kind of walk around the block and, go into the gym. But if you're not getting your heart rate up, you're not going to make the impact. You're not going to get closer to that goal of dropping the body fat or being more fit from a cardiovascular perspective. You can ask these questions of people in your network. And the reason why I ask those 2 questions, and this is kind of how that part of the conversation goes. The first one is an external stimulus. You hear a word, and then you associate me with that word. The other one is more, maybe this kind of internal, but more internal to me. You hear my name, and then this word pops up. And it is a view. The process will help you get better at understanding what your current state is. And then you can evaluate and say, hey, am I actually known for the things that I want to be known for? How am I evolving? Where am I going? What am I doing differently? What's next? If you know what your current state is, and you know what your desired state is, where you are and you know where you want to go, you can build a plan to get there. But you got to ask the questions, because in my head, I thought, well, everybody knows me as the problem solving guy, the one who simplifies their approach to solving problems, who asks a lot of questions, does all of those kind of things. The reality is, a lot of people know me as the sales guy. And where I want to go is the word that Cassie just said, the person who helps you execute. I can't do the work for you. You have to be willing to do the work yourself. So Cassie, thank you for being a friend. Thanks for doing this, especially on short notice, for going a bit long. And if you know of somebody who would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. Let Cassie and I know. Cassie, where should people follow you? Where would you like people to follow you before I wrap up that closing there?
Yeah, appreciate you asking. Cassie Tucker on LinkedIn is the best spot, but curious to know what you thought about this episode too. And reach out to Mike, as I said, if you need anything in terms of execution. It's a huge help.
I personally, I thought the episode went really well. I thought I got a little bit long winded in a couple of those things. I get excited about some of the stuff. One of the things that Cassie has launched recently with Hennessy is the She Will Be podcast, which ties to Le Sera, which is a bag brand, the high quality Italian leather bag brand. I'm not a bag person, so I won't do it justice. I'll get Cassie and Hennessy on the podcast and they can talk about that journey that they're going through. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?